to skip some interactive diagrams, but yeah, I'll get back to them. Jury instructions. Your role as an advocate, whether you're doing civil cases or criminal cases, when you're doing your opening, closing argument, your primary role is to tell the jurors what the law is in that case, the law that applies to your cause of action. And you have to explain those instructions to the jury and also show how the evidence supports the law. That's your job. And for years, this is what we as prosecutors did. The judge is going to tell me in a few minutes, to sustain the charge of first-degree murder, the state must prove the following propositions. First, the defendant performed the acts which caused the death of, and you go on and on and on, and you read these things. And you tell the jury, don't worry, you're going to see them in the jury room too. But, we've seen these, just like the pictures we've lived with for 2 years. We've seen these instructions dozens of times. We know what they look like. The jurors have no idea what they're going to look like when they get back there. For all they know, they're going to get something that looks like the last mortgage or refinance that they signed. They don't know. Why not put the instructions up on the screen? So when you're reading them, the jury gets a chance to see exactly what it looks like. So now, when they get that piece of paper back in the jury room, they're already familiar with that jury instruction. And this is the instruction for first-degree murder. This is exactly what you would read to the jury. But you know what? It's cool to watch them read along with you. I've seen it happen. They look at that screen and they follow along with you, and you see them nodding their heads. Okay, yeah, that is the law. And what you do, once you've gotten your instruction up on the screen, you break your elements down. And again, this applies to civil cases just like it does to criminal. Whatever cause of action it is, there are elements that need to be established if you are the plaintiff or the prosecution. So you break them down one at a time. Here is the first element of first-degree murder, that the defendant performed the acts which caused the death of Delia Glover. And now you go about telling the jury how your evidence shows this first proposition. How do we know that? Well, you heard from the testimony of Monica Morse. And you remember Monica. Boom, there's her picture. Of course they remember her. Now they're looking at her picture. They remember when she testified 2 or 3 days ago. Oh yeah, I remember her. Because you know what? I guarantee they're not going to remember all these names and all these faces if you don't have a visual. Remember what she said? In this particular case, like in several cases that get tried here, where there's either relatives who are witnesses or gang members, stories change over the course of a couple of years. This happened to be a family member that Monica was testifying against, so when it came time for trial, she wasn't very cooperative. Well, luckily, Monica had given a handwritten statement back when the crime was being investigated. So ladies and gentlemen, remember what Monica told the police and the state's attorney back on whatever date it was. Flash those pages up there. I don't have to pick up the pieces of paper. I just have to talk about them. And remember what she said. And you show how the evidence supports what she said back then. Not what she said in this courtroom yesterday in this particular case. Or it could be what she said in the courtroom. She was helping you out in the courtroom. But you go through the evidence and you're talking. And while you're talking, these visual images are coming up on the screen and backing up everything that you say. And there's her identification of the defendant. You would never go back and talk to the screen in the courtroom, but just to show you, this is a photograph the jury's already seen during the evidence portion of the case, which has Monica's signature on it, identifying him as the guy who committed the murder. And you go through that one witness at a time until you've gotten through all of your evidence that shows it was the defendant that performed the acts which caused the death of Delia Glover, and you get to your last one. And this was kind of interesting. Also a relative. This guy was so reluctant, he wouldn't even admit that was a picture of him. No, I don't know if that's me or not. But again, you do the same thing. He also was not cooperative. There's his statement that he gave to the police and the state's attorney back at the time the case was investigated. And again, you show how the evidence in the case supports what he said back then, not what he's saying now in court. He talked about a broken door in that statement, which he knew nothing about a trial. Sure enough, there's the broken door. I don't have to reach down, I don't have to pick up any photographs, I don't have to pick up any pieces of paper. I'm just talking to the jurors and making eye contact. I'm watching them watch the visuals that are backing up what I say.
And there's his identification of the offender. And that's how we know it was the defendant. Now, this little red check mark I put on there. Remember a little while ago I said, jurors see it on TV, they believe it's true. I firmly believe, just like with that diagram that they recreated, they go back there, when they talk about these elements, they're going to remember that check mark. I remember when the state showed us how they proved that, and they checked it off. Remember on that slide? You do that for all of your elements. There's the first proposition, the second proposition,